Okay, so I have all the equipment in the rack mounted, screwed in place. I did realize, however, that the power cords for these guys, I was going to look at these rack rails to see if I needed to move them, and I don't really have a good way to get these power cords through. I do have a couple of spare spots here. I could take them through, cut off the ends, re-terminate them. But I think what I'm going to do is try and do it right and move the rails back. Luckily, these Triple 8 racks do have, it's hard to see here, but there is like a little lip here it looks like it rests on, so I think I can take the screws out and scoot this back with all the equipment in it without having to remove the equipment. So I'm going to give that a try and see if we can do that, so that way I can get the power cords for these guys to just kind of come around the back side here. If I take them out there, then I can run them down this tray and wire manage them real nicely along here and get them down to wherever the power distribution ends up being. I have part of my power distribution down here, so that's probably where I'll bring them to. But we'll see. We'll get everything in. I do have a few blank spots in the rack for some of the equipment that's coming from the existing site. One will be the control processor right here, will be the RTI control processor will be in there. It's about the same width as this unit, so actually I think that's XP8, so I think it's actually full width, but should work nicely. I have a blank spot right above it. I may flip it around and put that blank spot here actually and put the RTI there, we'll see. I like to leave at least one empty slot in case they ever want to add another transmitter bank. Like I mentioned up here, I've got my 24 port with blank space, so you can see it makes it nice and easy to get in here and work on that. So I got those left in there. Down here I just use the Triple 8 blanks that the rack comes with to kind of as a placeholder for a couple units. I think I'll have, actually this shelf is going to go up here. I got to get some different size screws. The holes on this thing are a little small, so this was a shelf we had in stock. So I wanted to go ahead and try and get rid of it and get used since it basically looks like new. But this shelf's going to go up here, and then down below we will have, where this guy's not screwed in yet, they have a, I believe like a pull-out shelf, and actually I just said that wrong. So the audio processor is what's going to go here. So audio processor, and then down here will be the control processor and the, what was I thinking? Let's see here. Control processor and the pull-out shelf that they have. And then down here, we're going to get a drawer. So I'm going to have a drawer in here for manuals and things like that. That way they can easily reach that, pull that out, get to what they need to get to, remotes, whatever they decide to put in there. I got my blank space. I think I already talked about having a blank space for, I use a vintage shelf here for the heat that comes off these DirecTV boxes, let that heat get out, leave a blank space, and I put the drawer above so that way the drawer keeps that heat from going on up. It also makes a nice place to mount some stuff in the back of the rack, and then also lets that heat get out of there and get away from those DirecTV receivers as much as possible. Try to keep those things cool and keep that heat from going elsewhere in the rack where we don't want it. The other reason for having that blank space in there is the DirecTV receivers actually fit in here pretty snug when they're orientated vertically. Looks real nice, and they actually fit in here so snug that you can't pull them out with the lip on the shelf, which is great because they don't get accidentally pulled out or knocked around. I usually will run a bar across the back, either here or up here, just to keep them from being able to push back in when people are pushing reset buttons or using the buttons on the front panels. That way it keeps them looking nice and good, how they should. However, that means that if you ever have to get a receiver in or out to work on it, you actually need to loosen one of the shelves up and lift it up a little bit in order to get it to pop out. So that's the other thing that this blank space does, is you can pop this blank out, loosen the screws here, lift that shelf up a little bit, pull your receiver out if you have to replace one or whatever, and makes that nice and easy to work on. And then of course this space down here will be the amps coming from the existing store location will go in there. So we'll have this all pre-wired up and ready to go. So that's basically where we're at. I'll have I think a branded panel up here, and then I'll either have a blank space or just leave this open at the top there for some extra ventilation. Should be fine, and give a little room for expansion if we ever want to add something in the future. So that's where we're at. We got it all in now. I'm going to see if I can scoot these rails back, try to find out how that goes, and hopefully not drop all this equipment on the ground. Okay, I was able to move the rack rails back, so now I got a little bit of space between here. So now my plan is to take correct into the cable here. I'm going to stick this cable through here, bring it around the front, plug it in, and then I'm thinking what I'm going to do with this is have it come around the corner like this, just run right down the rail there, something like that. So we'll see how well that works out, but I think that'll work out nicely, just running that right down the rail. So anyway, that's the plan for now. Equipment's all in and ready. So now start hooking things up. Put some of my, I usually like to start with getting my power cables in place first, since those are the ones that usually stay in place the longest. So I'll go ahead and try to get my power cables all in and get some of my lacing bars in back here for wire management. I may move these rails forward a little bit, just to get me a little bit closer to the equipment. As far as they are, that's going to be kind of a stretch for cables going across there. I like to leave room, but I like to not have so much that all the cables droop on the way over to the devices. So I think I'll move those rails forward a little bit and then start getting power cables and things hooked up. Okay, got some power cables on here. Got some labels for these. Switch 1, switch 2, switch 3. Ended up wrapping those around. Ended up using zip ties, kind of coming right down the side of this rail. I think it's going to turn out real nice. Got all of them. Got the other end labeled. So each one of these is matched up. That way if you unplug something, you know what you're unplugging. Gonna go ahead and get all these connected up and hooked up in here, clean them up, get the wiring cleaned up a little more, and they should turn out pretty nice. Let's see here, this is the data switch that's coming from this guy right here. That's that 16-port switch that we're using for just generic data stuff. These switches here are going to be for all our video over IP, all the just add power stuff. So that's what these guys up here are. This is going to be all of our TVs and transmitters coming in. Like to split the transmitters up. In this case, I'm going to be doing about 4 per row. So we have 4 here that come into these top 4 ports, 4 here that come into these bottom 4 ports in that switch, etc., all the way down through. And then all the other ports you see are going to be TVs, receivers going out to TVs. So this is just data just for control system and those sort of things. We'll run those into these ports down here, link those into the respective things in the control system. Makes it nice and easy to reboot something, pull something, power cycle something. I think it ends up looking pretty good. I've done them with the switches in the back as well, but did this the last time and really liked how it looked. So I'm going to stick with that on these next few until we come up with something that looks better. But anyway, got the power set up. This got a DBX unit that's going to be in this slot up here. It's going to be an existing one from the store. So I'm going to go ahead and get the power cables prepped for that and everything. I got spare power cables, so that way I'll be able to just slide that unit in, plug it all in, and make that nice and quick, not having to be attaching wire dress and cabling as we go. So anyway, that's the plan for now. Can go ahead and move forward and get the rest of these guys wired up. Get some more of the power cabling done. I usually try to avoid zip ties on most things with cables like this. If you ever have to get them out, it's kind of a nightmare, but in this case with the way I'm bringing the rails, it's just going to be the best way to do it. But for any of my data cabling or anything like that that I bring down through here will be Velcro. With power cables, I'm not as worried about those. They're most of the time those power cables are going to be used for something that's going to be there. Even if we swap out a piece of equipment, something's going to probably use that power cable. So anyway, that's where we're at so far. Okay, so now I've got started putting the link lines in for these. These are going to be the transmitters, so they're going to link down to these units down here, the just power transmitters. So I'll show you a little bit about that here in a moment. So basically I'm going to go through, first of all, I should probably go through and kind of explain why certain things ended up where they were. I know we talked about just having things where people can reach them and things like that, having things kind of prioritized in that way. But probably the first thing I should kind of go through is why I picked the locations I did. So basically these are the network switches. They're going to run all the IP, video over IP traffic. So I want to be able to see those. We used to use rear port video over, or rear port switches. However, I switched to front port because every once in a while somebody needs to unplug one or reset one. That's usually the easiest way to fix any issues that you run with those things. They're PoE powered, so the switch provides the power. So the easiest way is just unplug a unit, leave it out for a couple seconds, plug it back in. That usually takes care of the issues. The issues are pretty rare, but you know, every few months, one or two of them flukes out, or if there's a power outage, sometimes they come up a little wonky. Just power cycle them usually fixes them. So we've had a lot of stuff with customers needing to pull the whole rack out, wheel this whole thing out of the little alcove that it's in, reach in behind, trying to read labels in the dark. So we switched to having these front panel. So that's why we're using front access switches. So that way somebody can easily come up here and they can find, you know, transmitter 1 or receiver 1, unplug it, plug it back in, and fix the issue nice and easy without having to pull the rack out, without having to move things around. It's easy to talk them through. We'll end up labeling all of these patch panels, so it'll actually say, you know, receiver 1, receiver 2, TV 1, TV 2, etc. So it'll have all the information there, so it's really easy for them to see what's going on, pull something out, see if a line's maybe negotiating 10-100 instead of gig. That can cause some issues. That's something that we can say, hey, what color is that light? And they can tell us right away. And we can say, hey, maybe a wire got nicked or a termination went bad or something like that. Just things like that that makes troubleshooting nice and easy, having those things front access. And with the way we do them with the patch cables, it actually looks super clean. I'll show you some more of that as we get further along here. But anyway, that's where we're using front access switches. So anyway, all these patch panels, the yellow is what we use for video over IP. Anything that's a transmitter, anything that's putting out video signal is yellow in our protocol or our way of doing things. So all these transmitters will have yellow jacks. So that's, you can tell these are the four transmitters up here, 4 more transmitters here. We like to split our transmitters up on our switches, so if they lose a whole switch, they don't lose the entire system. I've seen where if you have all the transmitters on one switch and that switch goes out, you just lost every single TV. If we split them up, now we can take down a switch, reboot a switch or something like that, and they still have over half of their transmitters and TVs up and running. So that's the reason that we split those up. One of the reasons. Another reason is because those things are putting out between 150 and 300 megabits of data each, so each transmitter. And having those all in one switch means that switch is doing a lot of work. Splitting those up across the switches kind of divides up that work, keeps it so that one switch doesn't have to do all the work of transmitting everything out to all the other switches, kind of splits that up. Also lets us take advantage of some of the benefits of, what's it called? Basically full duplex communication. So not only do we have one-way communication, if everything's on one switch, then everything is limited by our uplinks, which we have 10 gig uplinks that we'll be linking the switches with. But if we had all our transmitters on this switch, then this 10 gig link would be the max bandwidth we could put through. So 10 gig would be our limit. If we have these split across switches, if you know how full duplex switching works, basically you have 10 gigs transmit, 10 gigs receive. So we actually have 20 gigs of bandwidth that can go between these switches if half of it's coming from here. So by splitting up our transmitters, we're also splitting up our bandwidth and not putting as much on one switch. So anyway, that's kind of the reason we do that. Have our switches here. We want them to be able to see them. We want the customer to be able to see and access those, but they're not going to need to get them all the time, so that's why they're high up in the rack. The next thing is our just had power transmitters. So these are our video over IP transmitters. These lights here have some diagnostics information, so it tells it if it's powered on, data. If this light is flashing, it tells it that it's working, but it's not receiving a video input. If it's solid, it says, hey, everything's good, I'm putting out video. So we know, hey, if the light's solid, then the issue's on the other end. If the light is blinking, we know there's either maybe this unit needs rebooted, or more than likely, maybe power needs turned on, maybe a loose HDMI cable coming into the unit. We need to be looking in the rack for the issue. So that kind of easy diagnostics. We'll actually label all these, so it'll say input 1, input 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Let's see here. Down below that, we're going to have I believe we're going to do our audio processor here. Generally, this will be controlled by the control system. However, if the control system's acting up or if there's some problem, they can come to the front panel and manually control the audio processor. So we like to keep that nice and easy to get to if they need to manually control that unit. And the LCD screen on that thing is not viewable from a very good angle, so if I put it too low, it's really hard to see it. So I like to keep it really not much lower than this. This is going to be our data switch. So this is going to be something where all of our main data for the system is going to be going across. It's also a PoE switch, so we'll have some access points that may come off of this depending on our setup. So all of our data runs for this switch are going to be on this side of this patch panel. And then on this side of the patch panel, we'll have some things in here. One of the benefits of using these keystone patch panels is, sorry, there's got some heavy rain going on behind me. Hopefully you can hear me okay. But anyway, one of the benefits of the keystone patch panels is we can put other things in here besides just data. We can put HDMI, we can put audio. So we'll have our auxiliary inputs will be on this side of the panel. So we'll have an HDMI, an auxiliary audio input like 3.5 millimeter. May have a couple other things too, depending on what the client needs. So those will be on that side. Then we'll blank out whatever we don't need, and then the rest of this will be data, including some local data feeds into the rack itself. Uplinks to our switches for their main uplink will come up here for them to connect to the rest of the network and the control system. That'll be in there as well. So we like to keep those nice and centrally located. I used to do them in the back of the rack, but kind of for the same reason as the switches up here. Every once in a while you need somebody to reboot something. You need to say, hey, does this have a link light, etc. So having those in the front is really nice, and we want to have our auxiliary ports up here anyway, so it works good. We're not having just a huge blank keystone panel. If we have a keystone panel in there, might as well put our data switch in there and have everything in there. Right here we're going to have a shelf. This is going to be their commonly used items. Buffalo Wild Wings uses an upshow unit, basically like a content player. They use a couple of those, so those content players will be in here. Some of the older stores, we used to have a DVD player here. So basically just whatever miscellaneous items they want that may be specific to their store and are not rack mountable will sit on this 2-space shelf. Below that, we've got a little bit of room for, I believe we'll have our control processor in here, as well as, let's see here, what's the other unit? So your control processor, audio is going to be up here. I think there's one more unit goes in here, but I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But if there is, it's coming. Oh, the drawer. They're going to have a pull-out, in their current rack, they have a pull-out shelf that they sit their laptop on for streaming. If they're showing like a streaming game or something that's local distribution only, they'll pull it up on that laptop, use the auxiliary inputs to stream into the system so that they can pull out that little shelf, set the laptop right there, and they're ready to go. So that's what that's reserved for. We'll have some blank spacing here, and then this unit right here is actually our power distribution. So this is a switch power distribution unit watt box made by Snap AV. We can individually reboot any of the switches, any of the other control system, anything in the rack we can individually reboot from this. There will be one port that will link out to an auxiliary power strip just to kind of whatever miscellaneous other items they have if they want to get connected into the system as well. That'll just be off of one of those outlets, but most of the system's going to be off of here. Anything that we want individual ability to power cycle is going to be on that. Below that, we're going to have a rack drawer. I think I talked about earlier how I like to have a way to separate the heat from these DirecTV boxes that comes up through here from the rest of the system. So by putting a drawer in here, that's a unit that's not going to be affected by the heat. The remotes and things get nice and warm, but other than that, that lets that heat kind of stop with that drawer and go somewhere else. So we got this vented panel in here, so all that heat comes up through this panel. Comes up here, we got a blank space, blank 1U here, so that heat can come up, go out, the front, the back, the sides, wherever it needs to go. I guess it can't go out the front because it's a solid panel, but it really makes a big difference. In the sites that we've done this, I noticed the amount of heat generated by those is substantially lower than anywhere where I've seen these squished right on top of something, or just simply not having a vented panel and all the heat has to go out the back. Just letting as much as we can get that heat out of there as fast as possible is our goal. Down here we just got the bottom tray that those DirecTV units will sit on. It does have some vents in the back and things, but for the most part those things will pull air in the front and in the back, and convection will let those things, as long as you got somewhere for that heat to go, convection will let them pull that air through. I've tried putting vented panels here. It makes a little bit of difference sometimes, but sometimes I'm tight on space down here and have to put an amp right up against it, so it doesn't make any difference anyway. So anyway, down here we'll have our amplifiers and things that are coming from the existing rack. That's where those will go. So back up to what we were working on. Like I said, I have a guy that's currently pre-terminating cables. I figured out what my longest one was, and cut a bunch of them. He's pre-terminating, putting the keystones on, so they're ready to go. I just have to feed them in the rack. So we're bringing those in here. You can see we're labeling them as we go. So transmitter 1, transmitter 2, etc., all the way through. To make those look nice and neat, we're bringing those down the side rail with some Velcro. Get my camera to focus here. There we go. So we're bringing this down the side rails, and then they come right across. They're turned, come across this lacing bar, and then they're going directly into the units. So you can see I haven't terminated these yet, but I have started labeling them. So they're all cut to length, and each one will go in. It'll get an RJ45 and plug directly into this unit. You can see on the other end, it's got its label right there. If I can get the camera to focus here. Transmitter 1. Actually, the first time I popped these in, luckily before when I was getting ready to put my labels on is when I noticed I had popped the first 4 in and realized that I was thinking left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's how I'd done them. So I actually had to flip these around, and actually what I did is I flipped the keystones. Since those are all the same length, it didn't affect, I didn't have to rechange my wires or do anything different. I just made my labels, so this is 1, and then I flipped my keystones around, so 1 was right there, and I moved it to right there. And I did the same thing on this one. Didn't have all these in, but I had a couple of them in. So I was able to just flip those keystones around and solve that problem, everything lined up. That's a little stuff that you catch, and sometimes it's like, oh shoot, I've got to flip some things around, or I've got to redo some work that I've done. That's just part of building up racks. So these do have their own power input. We can use these IEC power inputs. However, they also will accept PoE. So generally I like to power them from the switch. That way if I need to power cycle the transmitters, I can have them just, like with the TVs, unplug the patch cables and reboot the transmitters without having to, again, talk them through coming in the back of the rack, flipping a power switch off, flipping it back on. I've done that in the past, but don't really need to do that anymore. So I'm just going to use that PoE power. We always have this as a backup if we needed, maybe a switch lost PoE or the PoE stopped working in here. We could easily plug in a power cord real quick and get them back up and going. But it also is less power cords to deal with. That's, 5 less power cords that I've got to find a spot for. Less power strip, power distribution, so just saves money overall. I'll throw them in stock and use them for something else when I need a IC. You always need those randomly. So anyway, we've got our switches in here. They do have rear lights, which is kind of handy, so we can actually see, because this is meant to be the front of these, though you can mount them backwards in the way that we've done them. But they do have lights back here, so we'll be able to see when things are fired up and everything from back here. They are labeled, of course, and all ready to go. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to start getting all these terminated, getting these punched in. There'll give you a side shot here, so this is kind of what it looks like. These come across, they'll plug right in. The HDMI will also come in and plug in here. It'll be labeled. Go down to the DirecTV boxes and the other components in the rack. I'm also going to take some Velcro. I'm going to Velcro along here to get these cleaned up nice and good. I'll have another row coming down here once I get those in, and so usually about halfway through I'll split my Velcro and have a kind of 2 runs. Really, I think looks nice. I try to leave a little bit of slack on these. You can see, if I figure if the plug is plugging in right about there, you can see there's a little bit of slack on this, enough to move it around. It's not going to be yanking on the connector or anything like that. So anyway, that's just kind of how we do that for these things. So that's what we found works the best. Anyway, on the back of these, I guess I should explain that. On the back of these, we have data and HDMI input, also RS-232 if you're using it. Or not, we're just using CEC to control stuff. And then that's transmitter 1 with its data and power lights mirrored with the ones up front. Transmitter 2, same thing, so that just repeats on every single unit. So basically each one of these rack mount units is 4 transmitters in one. And nice thing, I was talking about the PoE power, if even one of these units is powered, it will power the whole unit. So even if I was to lose PoE on one of them, it would still be powered. The only downside is if you need to reboot the whole unit, you actually need to unplug all 4, which is a little bit of a downside, but these things reboot in less than a minute, so they're usually not an issue. Just to tell them, hey, unplug transmitters 1 through 4, and you're good. That's another reason to split these up the way I have them, is I can tell them, hey, they say, hey, we have some issue with transmitter 4. I can go, okay, well, see those 4 yellow ones up top? Unplug all 4 of those yellow connectors, leave them out for 10 seconds, plug them back in, and see if that solves the problem. The rest of these, for the receivers, these will all be TVs, receivers. and these will be black. So black is the outputs and yellow is the inputs. Makes it nice and easy. Yellow, back in the composite video days, was yellow, so we've stuck to that, and just makes a nice easy way to say, hey, that's where the video signal's coming from. So anyway, I'm going to get to it, and I'll catch up later. I think I got power cables labeled and everything. Can't remember exactly where I left off in the last video, but we'll go from there. Okay, so got the rest of these in. These down here, I think we're going to have one transmitter that's going to come in from somewhere in the store, so that will be reserved for that. These are getting blanked off, so these three here will be empty, but that'll give us some room for expansion. If we want to add any more transmitters down the line, we'll have at least 3 slots open for that already configured. Over here we've got our uplink, so this is our uplink into the switch. You can see how these nice short patch cables will work real nice. Again, they can come around here, unplug something, plug it back in, nice and easy. So this is actually the main uplink, that's why it's blue. It's going to be the data uplink to communicate with the switch, for the control system to talk to the units and all that kind of stuff. So this isn't going to have video traffic going over it, just strictly data. So that's what that is, and that actually links down here right to here, this port 21. This is going to link up to our data switch, along with our control system, some other stuff. These are actually just pass-through keystones. These guys right here. I use these on a few items where, like I said, there's going to be a shelf in here for some miscellaneous items, and that way we can just put some short patch cables, maybe like 3-foot patch cables that can come down and come into those devices as needed. They may not all be in use off the bat, but we'll have patch cables in the ones that are in use, and then I'll have a few for expansion without having to like run a cable across the front or do something funky like that. Just kind of preparing for the future and having those ready to go. Makes it nice and clean, makes it match everything else that's in the rack. So you can see this blue line comes in here. This will get strapped onto here once we're sure everything. I've moved this already 3 times, so I was going between a few different ports here. I want to leave this first port for my main uplink to the internet. So from the main networks, that's what this is going to be. So I originally had it in 23, but the cables weren't long enough to reach unless I used longer ones, and I like to keep them these short ones. And I don't think I'm going to need all 16 ports on this, so I went ahead and moved everything over a little bit, and this is going to be my uplink. This is going to be my just a power switch uplink, so the uplink to the big switches. And then these are going to be devices such as DECA for communicating with the satellite boxes, control system, audio processor, all that kind of stuff. Those things are going to come in some of these other ports as we get those wired up into the rack. Watt box, that'll be another item that'll come up in there. So those will all come up in there and be linked into the switch. Over here I got some things blanked off. I can grab a few more blanks because I ran out of what I had in my hands. Oh, actually got some right here. So I'll get those snapped in. That'll blank all those out. And then like you can see here, we've got our auxiliary HDMI, auxiliary 3.5 millimeter. Anything else that we add can go this way. And if I need some more data items, I can actually add a few of those this way before I run out of ports. So yeah, so that's where we're at so far. Back in the back here, all the cables, got those all dressed. So those are all nice, Velcroed. You can see, like I was saying, I bring them as a whole. And then once we get close to the patch panels, I split them out into a couple of different groups. So that way they can go to the top and bottom. I think it looks real nice. Ends up being a nice setup, I think. Then they come down, they trace down this bar right here, Velcroed on. I like to use Velcro over zip ties. That way if you ever have to add a line or change something, or somebody in the future wants to do something, there's no excuse for not wire managing it nice. If you use zip ties, people either don't want to cut out the existing ones and lose all the wires, have everything go everywhere, so they either leave them in place and just add ones on top, and then it ends up being a mess, or B, they end up just not bothering at all and just saying, oh, I didn't have zip ties to replace them with me, and then they've got a great excuse for not doing wire management properly. If you use Velcro, A, it's more recommended for cat anyway, and B, you can add a wire real easy. You know, you can either A, fish it down through what's there, and if you need a little more slack in it, just unstrap it and restrap the new items in. So all these lines here are prepped and ready, labeled, cut to length, everything. So I'll be putting RJ45s on all those. They should be cut to length. Basically, each lacing bar will split out to 2 sets of transmitters. So this is going to be the line for port 1 of that transmitter and port 1 of this transmitter. So like I think I mentioned earlier, basically there should be enough slack on these that once they have ends on them and plug in, they'll still have some slack to move around, make some adjustments and things like that if needed. Maybe swap to a different port if you need to test something temporarily to see what's going on, do some troubleshooting, things like that. There should be some slack for that. So try not to leave too much slack, but leave enough to make it flexible and be able to do what you need to do. Yeah, so all those are sitting there. I'll have to get all those terminated and brought up, and then those will, once they're all done up, we'll run Velcro along just like up here, and those will should look nice. I've done it this way a number of times, and it's always turned out pretty good. Our labels, got all our labels on. I think I mentioned that earlier. I try to, as much as I can, try to get them towards the direction that people are going to be looking. If I'm looking in this rack, try to find something. I'm going to probably pop this side panel off. These on this rack, the side panels all pop off. Makes it really easy to work on, and you can pop them back on. Gets a nice clean look to the rack. These trip light racks, but makes it really easy to get things, be accessible. Even without having to pull the rack all the way out of the alcove. You can pull it halfway out, pop a side panel off, reach in and do something if you need to, and see what's going on. Let some good light in the rack if nothing else. So I think it's a great design. So I like using those. Anyway, that's about as far as we've gotten today. So still got a lot of work going for us, a lot of work cut out to finish up. But yeah, there's just kind of a look at what we've got so far. The way I did these is, like I said, I had somebody pre-terminating them. I would stick them all in here, just get them in the Velcro, and then I'd have the tails linked, tails all hanging outside the rack. Since they were all cut to length originally, and they were all basically the same length, so what I would do is I would pull one up and out. I'd come around here, get a keystone, pull it up and out, some slack, slap my label on, plug it into where it needed to be. Now it was about 2 feet shorter than all the rest, so I'd go down, find the one that was shorter, bring it across, strap it into its Velcro, make sure it's to length, go do the next one. Basically what I've got here is I put a piece of Velcro for every 2 transmitters. So the lines for 1 are going to be this piece of Velcro right here. Lines for 2 will be this piece of Velcro, 3 and 4. So it makes it real nice and easy as I'm bringing lines through. I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I can come back and label 1, 2, 3, 4. That way it lets me stay moving without having to be stopping and labeling every 10 seconds or trying to do something where I'm pre-cutting and pre-labeling. I can just come through here. I set my length. Once I get the length that I'm happy with, then I strip it back a little bit, cut off any excess, usually only about a foot or so of excess depending on which line. Some of them only had about 6 inches, some of them had probably 1.5 feet. But not a lot of waste, but yet it still lets us be flexible with what we need to do, change some things around. Actually was originally going to try to do 3 units per bar, but it ended up just being too many wires on a bar. So I actually moved, I had this bar was down here, was going to serve all 3 of these units. I ended up moving it up and added another lacing bar down here, so that way I've only got 2 wires per bar. Actually, this bottom one only has 1 because it's just servicing this bottom transmitter unit here. But once I get the HDMIs in there as well, it's going to make that kind of tight. And so I was worried that there'd be a little too much going on for each bar, so I decided to move those around. Had plenty of, just kind of scooted some of the slack over here. Didn't have to recut anything, didn't have to change anything up. I was able to just kind of do that on the fly, because that's just how this goes. Sometimes you gotta make adjustments on the fly and see what works. And as you go through and design it, you're going to change your mind about things, and something that might have seemed like a good idea when you were first thinking through, you're going to want to switch up. So having the time to do this in the shop and take your time, do it right. That's what matters, and that's how we keep quality up and try to have time doing this now instead of trying to do this in the field when we're all trying to do a quick changeover. So anyway, I'm going to get the rest of that done. Let's see here. So yeah, so after I bring those across, I cut those to length like I said. The labels, on the labels, the way I handle these is I actually use my finger, and I just went to that first crease in my finger. I think the standard is like 2 inches, or I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it seems to be a good way to do it in my opinion. That crease in my finger is an easy thing to remember, and I can do all of the lines and have them all be the same without having to get a tape measure out or out something like that. Just kind of a good balance, I feel like, between speed and quality. I'd say all these are not noticeably different. I think these were all done the same way, and I mean they look pretty much spot on. So as you go up through them, I feel like they're all, let's see if we put this bar, it looks like maybe the top ones are a little shorter. I might have done those a little differently, but yeah, I'd say they're all pretty much in line. So that's just how I choose to do them. Yeah, anyway, that's where we're at. So this is the second day of working on this rack. I think I probably put about probably 12 hours in so far. This is not a full day, but it's not a fast process building these things up, at least not if you're doing it right. But it looks good when we get it done. So hopefully it'll come out as nice as we want it to. But that's all I got for now.